Hi, I'm Max Brantley with the Arkansas Times. It's Tuesday, September the 1st. News from Arkansas. Asa Hutchinson, the governor, gave a speech today before a higher education group. Talked with Brett Powell, the director of higher education, says he has a plan to improve higher education and make Arkansas a better place for industry with better educated people. He wants to increase the rate at which people complete post-high school training courses, not just conventional college degrees, but other training programs. Like to increase it by 10%. He'd like to increase the completion, particularly by minorities who are underrepresented in the graduation ranks. But the big news is that he's talking about a change in higher education formula. He says something about a base amount for each college, but then more money pegged to how successful the colleges are at graduating people and doing their jobs. This will likely result in some real reallocations for some schools. I think the first place you can look for a problem, judging by some comments I've already seen on social media, or UAPB, which gets an extra amount of money for its years of being discriminated against as a predominantly black institution. It'll be in the crosshairs, I think, in the future. A lot more to come on that. The Attorney General says that she's asked the governor to set execution dates for some people on death row, 8 by number. The Supreme Court has cleared the way for use of some new drugs for executions. I don't know that setting the dates will necessarily speed executions again in Arkansas after a long delay. There's still pending court actions on the state law that was meant to correct the shortcomings in the procedure by which Arkansas accomplishes death by lethal injection. UALR reports today that its enrollment is up this fall after some declines in previous years. It says it has a huge increase in new students, first-time college students. These do include 1,400 concurrent high school students, that is, people who are still in high school, but also taking some college courses at UALR. That's helped their numbers quite a bit. A new national report shows that every city in the country virtually has a disproportionate number of minority policemen. That is, there are far fewer minorities than the percentages in the cities you see. Arkansas's Little Rock is the only city on the list. It's no different. Little Rock has about a 65% white police force in a city that's majority minority. Does it make sense? Does it contribute to attitudes? That's the big debate. Very interesting story on the Arkansas blog this morning, some political skullduggery. Attorney General Leslie Rutledge yesterday ruled in an opinion that she unusually authored herself, not through one of her staff members, that the state police should not turn over the personal file of Boyce Hamlet, who's the head of enforcement for the Alcoholic Beverage Control Division, a law enforcement agency. A Little Rock man wanted to see the record that constituted the reason he was fired as a state police trooper recruit back in 2000. It had something to do with lying on tests and that sort of thing. He thinks it's a measure of his credibility as a head of a law enforcement agency. He says he's not been truthful about his job history and other jobs he's held in law enforcement. Rutledge said that's old news, small news, and she doesn't see any compelling public reason for its release. She's a Republican. Hamlet's a Republican, the governor's a Republican, but they've got a man who's heading a police agency who 15 years ago lied and got fired over it. This brings into question his credibility in cases he handled when he was an investigator for another Republican, the Faulkner County prosecuting attorney. I think accountability says his records ought to be open. They've raised more questions by sealing them than they would have by just releasing them. Perhaps they aren't that big a deal. Let them be seen by everybody and we'll know the answer. A lawsuit was filed yesterday in Fayetteville to stop the election that's set for Tuesday, September 8th, on a Fayetteville civil rights ordinance to prevent discrimination in housing, public accommodation, and employment on basis of sexual orientation. I don't think this suit stands much chance of success, but it will get attention to the cause. They're going to raise a spurious argument that somehow this ordinance discriminates against religious people. Conservative churches are the main opponents of this ordinance. There's going to be a hearing Friday morning in Circuit Court in Fayetteville on the lawsuit. Speaking of sexual issues, that Kentucky clerk who's refusing to issue merit licenses says the Supreme Court can't tell her what to do. She again refused marriage licenses today to same-sex couples, despite a U.S. Supreme Court ruling against her. She's been asked to be held in contempt of court by the ACLU, which wants fines, not jail times, to make her perform her legal duty. We don't really need to think very hard about how crazy it would be if every public official could decide how they did their duties based on their own particular philosophy, be it religion or otherwise. I just don't think the Constitution allows it. Speaking of equity under the law, an interesting story on the blog today out of the Northwest Arkansas edition of the Arkansas Democrat Gazette. Interesting outcome. A Latino man was accused of colliding not too seriously with another car. That other car chased him down, rammed him from the side in a Cadillac Escalade, pulled him out of the car, held him down for the police. The man who chased him called in his friend, the prosecutor, to sic the cops on him. The man who chased him down was J.B. Hunt Jr., the son of one of the most wealthy and most powerful men in Arkansas at one time before his death, the trucking magnate J.B. Hunt. Guess what? J.B. Hunt Jr. got charged with a felony. The young Latino man who started the incident got charged with a misdemeanor, leaving the scene of an accident. So perhaps justice can be done. Trial hasn't been held yet, but at least so far, they haven't jumped to the conclusion that the lesser of the two must be the guilty party and not the rich man. Interesting for some of our readers who are cynical about such things. And finally, in Hot Springs, the state medical examiner has completed an autopsy on the 18-month-old child who died in a heat-related death in Hot Springs more than a month ago. He was the son of a circuit judge, Wade Narramore. The special prosecutor, Scott Ellington, says that the autopsy alone doesn't complete the case. He hasn't said what the autopsy shows. It's expected to affirm on a preliminary finding that the death was heat-related. What we don't know are the circumstances that led up to the child being too long in a hot car. There are indications that a key issue remaining in the investigation is examining the judge's cell phone records for text and for indications of where he was in the time leading up to the death. I'm Max Brantley. I'll be back tomorrow.